What's up everyone, welcome back to another Resident Evil video, and welcome to the Mod Kid channel. Today's ranking of this tier list is going to be 41 of some of the best Resident Evil characters in the entire franchise. There's a couple of great characters in this game that didn't make it into this tier list, but we're just going to go with what we got because I didn't make this tier list. I do like how this list has a little bit of everything when it comes to heroes and villains, or antagonists and protagonists, or whatever you want to call them. But anyway, starting off this tier list is going to be Ada Wong, which I went ahead and put her at the top of this tier list in the God tier character category. I just want to point out that Ada Wong does not have any powers in the Resident Evil franchise, and she is still one of the most powerful characters in the entire series. I also really like how she's such a mysterious character because she's like a secret spy, so you really never know what her next intentions are going to be. Next up is Albert Wesker, and by the way, as you guys will go on to see, I'm going to be moving through these entries pretty quickly because there's like 41 of them, and I don't want this video to take forever. But sure enough, Albert Wesker is going to be a God tier character as well as Ada Wong, because honestly, if this was a tier list just of the villains of RE, Wesker would be at the very top of this list. Also, his rivalry with Chris Redfield was one of the best ones in all of gaming. But moving on to the next one is apparently Wesker's sister, which is Alex Wesker from Revelations 2. This one is going to be going at the bottom of this list because it's such an oddly put character, and I feel like they were just trying to go off the success of Wesker when they made Revelations 2, so they're like, hey, let's come up with Alex Wesker, and no one will question it. So I think the character of Alex Wesker was really unneeded and unnecessary, but moving on with this next one is going to be a really good character, and villain for that matter, in Resident Evil, and that is Alfred. I wanted to place him higher, but based on how much of a threat he served in Code Veronica, I had to go ahead and leave him in the mid category. One notable thing to point out is that he does release his twin sister that's a clone, Alexia, but before that he ends up getting shot by Steve, and pretty much I think bleeds to death because of that. Next up, in my opinion, is another mid character, which is Ashley Graham. To be honest with you guys, I just wanted Ashley to actually serve more of a purpose and not just be so weak and unreliable. But the only time you get to really see her fight back is when she's not with Leon. Alright, Barry Burton is going to be the first one of this tier list that I'm going to put in the great character category. I absolutely loved his part of Revelations 2, and I also have a lot of fun playing as him in RE5 Mercenaries. Next up is Billy Cohen, which I'm going to go ahead and put as the great character as well, even though he only appeared in RE0. Even though he was supposed to be like an ex-convict on the loose, he ends up serving as a really good teammate for Rebecca Chambers. So I always did like Billy, but moving on with this next one is going to be definitely a different character, and that is the Big Cheese from RE4. I went ahead and put him in the mid category because his boss fight was pretty easy, even though in cutscenes he looks pretty threatening. Next up though is another great character that only appeared in one game, and that is Carlos. The only time we got to see Carlos, of course, was in the RE3 story, but he ends up going on to be a really cool character because his leader was a pretty big douche, and he ends up turning on his leader. So that goes to show that Carlos is pretty cool. So again, I was always a big fan of Carlos, but moving on with this next character is definitely a God tier one, and that is none other than Chris Redfield. Chris Redfield has appeared in so many different Resident Evil games, especially through the mainline series, including of course the very first game, which is why he's now been coined the Golden Boy of the RE series. So not including Chris Redfield in the God tier category would be absolutely criminal, just like his sister Claire. I had to put Claire in the God tier category as well, just because I think she is a super underrated character who has never really gotten her chance in the main spotlight in a big mainline RE game. She's definitely not seen as one of the most popular fan favorite characters in the series, despite the fact that she is most certainly a mainline character. So I'm a big fan of Claire just because she is super underrated. This next one is now moving on to the villains, and this is Donna Bienvito from RE8. I'm not really too scared or freaked out about dolls or anything like that, so this one didn't really strike that much fear in me when playing, and to be honest, the fight with Bienvito was super easy. I remember that whole Bienvito section only taking me a few minutes and it being pretty simple. But moving on with this next entry is going to be a great character, if I do say so myself, and that is going to be Ethan. I was never really big on the Ethan Winters story during RE7, but then when we got RE8, and especially when we got Shadows of Rose DLC, I started to really grow fond of the whole Ethan Winters family story that they had going, and to be honest, now I really like Ethan as a character, and I have a lot of respect for him as well. But now another character from the RE8, RE7 stories, which is Evelyn. And for Evelyn, I didn't really care for her that much, so I went ahead and put her down at the bottom of the tier list. Speaking of Shadows of Rose DLC, there was a really cool fight that you had against Evelyn, which I remember being pretty cool, but other than that, I never really cared for her. Now next up is going to be Excella Gione, and I really wanted to put her higher up than the mid category, but I don't think she deserves anything higher than mid. Let me just get this out of the way that RE5 is my favorite game in the series, so that's why I have a really big liking to pretty much any character that's involved with that game. But the only times Excella ever felt powerful or threatening was when she was paired with Wesker. This next character, in my opinion, is a god tier character, and that is the Grim Reaper, Hunk. The only time Hunk has had a chance to be showcased in his own kind of story is of course the spin-offs and the DLC. He certainly seems like one of the most OP characters in the entire franchise, but we barely ever see him in the storyline, so it's really hard to tell if he's even a mainline character or not. This next entry is just a type of enemy, and that is of course the Hunters. There is a lot of different hunter types in the Resident Evil franchise, which all around makes them a pretty cool type of enemy, but when it comes to all the other characters on this tier list, I cannot place the hunters higher than them, so they're going to have their spot in the mid category. But moving on with my list here is going to be another villain in the Resident Evil series, and that is going to be Jack Baker, who I'm going to be putting in the mid category. Jack can be pretty threatening because of course he stalks you around a lot through the game and you have a lot of different boss fights with him, but I was never really a big fan of RE7, so therefore I'm not a really big fan of Jack Baker either. Next up is going to be a RE6 character, and that is Jake Mueller. Jake Mueller is definitely Albert Wesker's son, so if they ever used him in a future RE game, I think he would have a ton of potential. Unfortunately, we only got to see him in RE6 so far, but he went on to have a really cool campaign with Sherry Birkin, and all around that was probably my favorite part about RE6 besides Ada's campaign. Next up is definitely a god tier character, because if I didn't put her up in the god tier category, it would be an absolute crime, and that is Jill Valentine. I of course do like Jill Valentine a whole lot, but there is just so many other great characters in the Resident Evil franchise that she isn't one of my favorites, but she's definitely up there. When I was younger, I always struggled to beat RE1 and RE3, so Jill never really became one of my favorite characters. But now we're going to be switching our focus to RE Village again for a little bit, because now we're going to be talking about Heisenberg. Just like a lot of the characters from RE8, I never really cared for Heisenberg's character. I mean, I do think it's kind of cool that in his boss fight he kind of quotes RE5's Chris boulder punching scene, and it is kind of cool that he's got those magnetic powers kind of like Magneto, but other than that, I put him pretty low on this list. Next up is Lady D, which I went ahead and put pretty low in this list as well. I think Lady D was kind of an interesting character when you're running around the castle and you happen to run into her, because all you could really do was stun her, as she was a stalker type of enemy. But apart from that, her boss fight was pretty simple and out of the ordinary when it comes to a Resident Evil game. All I can say is it's the first time I recall ever fighting a dragon in Resident Evil. Oh damn, this next one is one of my favorite characters of all time, and that is Leon Kennedy. Ada and Leon are definitely my two favorite characters in Resident Evil because their chemistry is just simply unmatched. I like how Leon kind of started out as like that underrated character who's just a rookie cop, and then went on to become one of the most popular characters in the entire franchise with Resident Evil 4. By the time you get to play as Leon in RE6, you literally feel like you're playing as a living legend. Next up is the Lickers though, and this one I went ahead and put just a little bit higher than the Hunters because I think they're scarier and also more lethal. The part in RE5 when you guys have to split up and you get barraged with a bunch of Lickers always stands out to me, and I will just never forget that part and it being absolutely terrifying. Next up is a character I did not find terrifying whatsoever, and that is Lucas Baker. He's kind of more just like a deranged character or whatever, which I always thought reminded me of Chop Top from one of my favorite movies of all time, Texas Chainsaw 2. Another one I didn't find that terrifying either was Marguerite Baker. IRL, I do hate bugs and all, but in-game, they're kind of just like annoying and definitely not that scary or threatening. So Marguerite failed at being a good villain, I think. But moving on is gonna be Mia Winters. I think Mia is a mid character. Honestly, we don't really see her that much, and the most we actually get to see her is RE8, I believe. But even that, we don't really get to see Mia's character a lot in. Another mid character is Mother Miranda. I didn't really think Mother Miranda was all so great. I mean, the cutscenes in the game hyped her up well, but then her boss fight was definitely nothing more than mid. Oh, here we go. Next up is finally a great character, and that is Mr. X. Even though he is only a tyrant that appears in RE2, I think he was a great character. He served as a great stalker enemy in the RE2 remake and made traveling through the RPD absolutely terrifying. Another great character is of course Nemesis, which honestly I think is the best tyrant in all of Resident Evil. Nemi definitely paved the way for stalker enemies in video games, so I have a lot of respect for Nemesis for supplying some of the scariest jump scares of all time. Next up isn't a very great character, I don't think, so I went ahead and put him pretty low. Nikolai's character did a really good job of being a douche who only really cares about himself. He also doesn't really have any lore or any boss fight at all, so he's just a really hard character to like. Oswell Spencer, though, actually made it into this list, and I think he is a super underrated character and a great character. Like I said, he's super underrated. We only really get to see him in that cutscene where Wesker kills him off, but he's responsible for a lot of things in Resident Evil, also like the Spencer Mansion, and of course the father of Wesker, so he had some huge potential, I think. This next one is absolutely a great character, especially to be a character who's coming from a game like RE6. Even though he only appeared in 6, he made a huge sacrifice and helped Chris get out of there alive, which definitely does not go unnoticed. Next is a really great character in Resident Evil, but again, it's hard to decide whether or not Rebecca Chambers is considered a mainline character. Regardless of whether or not she is a mainline character or not, she is a OG character who was there for the first events of the Outbreak in RE0, and of course also there for the very first game ever, which was RE1. So Rebecca is very OG, but moving on with this next character is a newcomer in the Resident Evil franchise, and that is Rose. I went ahead and put Rose in the great characters, but right at the bottom, just because we haven't been able to see a lot of her yet, but Shadows of Rose DLC was absolutely fantastic, and I know that there is potential for her in the future, so there is a chance that she will make her way higher on this tier list and eventually maybe even a god tier character in the future. When it comes to trying to serve as a threatening and impactful villain in the franchise, I don't think Maru did a very good job of doing that. I don't recall the dialogue between Maru and yourself being very long, and also the boss fight wasn't very long either. Next up is, in my opinion, a great character, and that is Sherry Birkin. I think she's got potential for a god tier character in the future as well if they ever reuse her in a future game, because she was injected with the G virus and given the vaccine, which causes her to have some kind of regenerative healing powers, almost like Wolverine. So tons of potential for her in the future, but one that we might not see in the future is Sheva Alomar. I went ahead and put her in the god tier category, but first, hear me out. She actually went toe-to-toe with Albert Wesker in some instances, and came out completely fine. At first, she only seemed like a fellow BSAA member, but in the end, she proved that she could be a great mainline character, just like the others in the franchise. This next one is gonna be Dr. William Birkin, which I absolutely wanted to put in the great category, but I just had to put him in mid. But just know I put him at the top of mid, and he was right there at being a great character. He had a lot of different boss fights in RE2, but all of them are pretty easy for the most part, especially in the remake. But he did certainly leave a big impact on the series for helping make the T-Virus and making the G-Virus. This next one is a character I don't really care for much, which is Zoe from RE7. I mean, the first time I played RE7, I had to save Mia just because it made sense to me, and then I played it again a second time to save Zoe, and it just really didn't feel right saving Zoe over Mia, so I never really found Zoe to be a great character, but I never played the DLC, so maybe there's some lore in there that I'm just missing. Lastly on this tier list is gonna be the classic zombies from the OG RE games. I mean, without the classic moving zombies, Resident Evil wouldn't even be a thing. I would like to point out that if it wasn't for George Romero and films like Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, we would probably never see Resident Evil come to life. But certainly, if it wasn't for the zombies, I don't know what Resident Evil would even be, so I had to put them at least in the mid category, just out of respect. But now my tier list is done, so before I end this video, let's go ahead and review my entries from top to bottom so you guys can see if you agree with my list or not. At the very top of my tier list in the god tier characters and as my favorite characters are Ada, Leon, Wesker, Chris, Claire, Sheva, Hunk, and Jill. Then, what I think is the great characters are Barry, Spencer, Rebecca, Sherry, Billy, Carlos, Nemesis, Mr. X, Pierce, Ethan, and Rose. Now the mid characters are Birkin, Excella, Jake, Alfred, Ashley, Mia, the Lickers, the Hunters, Big Cheese, Mother Miranda, Jack, and the Zombies. Now at the very bottom of this list in the worst characters are Alex Wesker, Zoe, Lady D, Heisenberg, Nikolai, B and Vito, Evelyn, Lucas, Marguerite, and Maru. So that was a whole lot to say, but that is officially my Resident Evil heroes and villains tier list. I'm still not entirely sure what I'm going to title this video, but regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed, and feel free to comment down below what other kinds of tier lists you guys want to see when it comes to the Resident Evil topics. I also post Resident Evil videos every single day, so of course feel free to hit subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a single daily upload. I also want to leave a very special shout out to my one and only YouTube Pro member and the face of Reverse, Ico Pro Sam. But hopefully you guys all go on to have a good day, and with that being said, I will see you guys all in the next video tomorrow. Peace.